What is up, people? It's Dave, Duncan Kyle, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan Kyle and I will be checking out the new album from American metal band Machine Head. The band's new album of KINGDØM and CRØWN will be released on August 26th via Roadrunner Records. So, gentlemen, album number 10 from Machine Head, and the band's first ever concept album. That's right, gentlemen. Set in a futuristic wasteland where the sky is always crimson red. Of KINGDØM and CRØWN tells the tale of two characters, both faced with incalculable trauma, whose stories become bloodily entwined as this deep, dark record progresses. The album in concept was loosely inspired by the Japanese anime series Attack on Titan, says Rob, in the sense that in the series there is no good or bad guy. Both sides believe they're doing the right thing, but both are committing atrocities and evil. The band have also had some lineup changes, obviously, since the last album. So now made up of Rob Flynn, obviously, on vocals and guitar, Vogue of Decapitated on guitar, Jared McAhern on bass, backing vocals, and Matt Alston on drums and percussion. However, the drums for this album were recorded by Naveen Copperweiss of Entheos and previously Animals as leaders. The album was produced by Rob Flynn and Zach Oren, who also worked on the last Machine Head album as well. Okay, gentlemen, of KINGDØM and CRØWN. I was not much of a fan of that last album, if I'm honest. Catharsis was...
Yeah. That's the right reaction.
A bit of a mess, that album. Yeah.
I didn't listen to it. There's a theme coming up on this review, so...
But we did do a reaction to a track from this album, a track called Unhallowed, to get an idea of what to expect from this release. And to be honest, it did not fill me with confidence that this album was going to be any good whatsoever, to be honest. Singles are a funny one. No, that singles can either misrepresent or not quite give you the overall tone of an album. So I was still kind of interested to hear where this one would go. So after checking out the album, listening to it a few times through, I must admit I don't hate this album. Turns out the track that we reacted to, Unhallowed, probably for me anyway, probably the worst track on the album, to be honest.
I'll agree.
I don't understand the choice of single for that, picking that track, to be honest, but it's just very kind of generic in places. However, the album as a kind of whole, I think is a marked improvement over Catharsis. I'll start off with the positives, all right, and then we'll get into the other stuff. I think this is the tightest Machine Head I've sounded in a long time. I think this lineup and the addition of Vogue in particular on guitar has not only made this band sound kind of more of a unit, but I think it's raised the level of technicality that you normally hear on a Machine Head album. Now, I am not saying that this album is wall-to-wall intricacy and flawless, masterful riffs. It is a Machine Head album at the end of the day. There is, a little touch of new metal and, the usual kind of groove riffs and, the kind of thrashy rhythms, the harmonics, all that kind of stuff, the stuff that they're known for. But in parts of this album, there are some more kind of technical elements that we're not used to hearing from Machine Head. And the solos, especially, which I'm assuming are predominantly Vogue, I think, are pretty good in this album as well. Drumming-wise, I'm going to start here, obviously. I love Naveen's playing. I've been following him for a long time. And as a drummer, I really appreciate what he can do behind the kit. He's not being used to his full potential here. not even close, to be honest. But he's a drummer that he's always had this kind of really like natural amount of groove to his playing. So I think he actually slots in here pretty well. He's kind of nailed the brief. He can kind of knock it up a level when it's needed, a little bit of more complexity. But he mainly kind of keeps it in the pocket for the most part. There's little flurries here and there where he shows, what he can do. But in general, it's a very tight performance from Naveen. Jared on bass, I think is another kind of upgrade to the Machine Head lineup, to be honest. I think not only does he provide the kind of the weight and the backbone as a bassist, but as a backing vocalist, I think he brings some nice layers of melody and kind of harmony to the stuff. And his tone is slightly different to Rob, so it's nice to hear something other than just Rob Flynn doing all the vocals, all the screams and the melody. Rob he'd said publicly that he had started to take vocal lessons during the whole like pandemic, and I think like for the most part his melody and his kind of like tonal kind of melody, he sounds pretty confident on this release. I'd say it's a fairly solid vocal performance from him, and there's no rap vocals, which is obviously a bonus as well on this album. Musically, as I said, I think this is a step up from Catharsis. I think this album actually sounds like it has a continuous tone or theme to it. It doesn't jump around massively in style like Catharsis did. Like, what was that folk punk song all about on Catharsis? Really? Well, like, what the fuck? The tracks here feel connected, which I think may be partly down to the concept of the album, possibly not. They have obviously a kind of storyline running through them, but regardless, I think this sounds more cohesive overall than the last album. I also think it's a fairly good representation of Machine Head from over the years without leaning into one particular album sound too much. There are little bits of new metal. They don't go overboard with it. There's, the more kind of thrashy early era of the band at points, which is probably my favourite era. And then there's the more kind of like lengthy, progressive, more expressive side of the band that we've heard them venture into on albums like The Blackening. And I think it's a good variation of eras across the album. I think the more ferocious parts on tracks like Become the Firestorm or Kill Thy Enemies, they sound huge, really meaty sounding. I particularly like the kind of almost kind of inharmonious riffs on Kill Thy Enemies. It reminded me of remember Trials that we like talk about back in the day from Chicago, thrash band. It reminded me of them a little bit. So I thought there were some really good moments on this album. On the other side of that, there's a lot on this album that just sounds like Machine Head doing old Machine Head. The riffs, they may not be like identical per se, but there's a lot on here that sounds familiar. Even down there's a moment on the album as well. There's a bass line comes in. It's just the bass solo on its own with the kind of like scratchy guitars and stuff in the background, very kind of like Take My Scar sounding. So like there's a lot of stuff here that you'll have heard them do before. And I'm sure like these tracks will go down a treat live. Like there's a heaviness on this album that will transfer very well to a live setting. But I think if you're looking for something like new or like thought-provoking from Machine Head, then it's probably not on this album. I think that, as I said, the addition of Vogue has added a little more of a technical slant and a little bit, of the odd kind of like discordant breakdown-esque riff that they haven't done much of in the past, but that's kind of Machine Head. They don't really push the envelope that much. I think, Duncan, maybe you may have said this before, but they are a bit of a kind of like chameleon type band. They will turn their hand to whatever's cool at the minute. And there's certain tracks here that feel like Machine Head almost kind of rehashing old ground, but with a new lineup and a new band. My other issue I have with this is the length. My God, I don't know if it's just me, but an hour of Machine Head feels like about 3 hours of Machine Head. And I've got to the stage now where I can't do any more than about 45 minutes of Machine Head at one time. If I'm totally honest, I kind of started to zone out of this album as it kind of hit the last third. I think it's track 8, I think it is, Kill Thy Enemies. That was the last track where I was kind of still engaged with the album. Rotten to the Core, there's a decent chorus and a good groove on that one, so I kind of came back in on that one, but I was kind of starting to switch off, if I'm honest. So me personally, I think the album is too long. I think it does need trimmed quite a bit. That being said, I think this is the best thing they've done in about 3 or 4 albums, to be honest. It may not be necessarily new or groundbreaking, but it sounds organised. Like, I think, and tonally, the tracks feel like they're all on the same page. I think as a band, they sound excellent. They're super tight. You can hear a kind of level of unity that they've not had in a few albums, in my opinion. So I think this version of the band is one that I would stick with if I was Rob Flynn. Anyway, so some positive to come from this. I did not hate this at all. I kind of expected to go into it and not really enjoy it, but there's a handful of tracks in here that I actually quite dug, and I think that production sounds good, and the band themselves actually sound on top of their game, super tight. Kyle, what about yourself? What did you think of this new one from Machine Head?
Having been a Machine Head fan since the mid-90s,
oh yeah,
I was massively disappointed with the last 10 years of the band.
Yeah.
Locust, I know Duncan's going to disagree, but I really liked that album, and that was about 10 years ago. I liked it. I mean, I just did. Everything that came out from after that has been like, okay, maybe it's time to put it down. Maybe it's time to get rid of some band members and try again. And they did.
Yeah.
On this album especially. But yeah, no, the first front, like, half, I guess, of this album is absolutely full of great moments. I'm not gonna lie, I went in with low expectations and they definitely exceeded them.
Yeah.
I was expecting some more catharsis bullshit, to be honest, to be perfectly frank about it. Even the album before that I wasn't massively in love with. What was it, King and Diamonds? I don't remember. Who gives a shit, right? But this has brought some great stuff with it. It's got some really huge that opening track after the clean bit, which is like a Rob Flynn staple at this point, is actually, I was like, holy fuck, this is actually not bad. Some moments I actually quite dug on it. There's some good tasty bass lines as well, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm pretty much going to parrot pretty much all that you said already. The second track, though, that is definitely, I think, my favorite one. It just goes hard and goes not long, but goes long enough. Really, just, yeah. But I completely agree with the what you said about the last third of the album. It's just like, yeah, I'd started to zone out too. It was just a bit like, okay, pick it up now. You're Machine Head doing Machine Head. You're doing what Machine Head's done before in a new way, in a way, because of Org and all these other people have joined. So it's kind of refreshed in a way with a slight difference. And I'm glad that they've gone back to what they do well. Because it shows that they can still do what they became famous for, not going off in weird other directions and disappointing everybody. I think the break, because there's a couple of like filler like tracks where they just sort of whisper and do weird stuff. I think the first one was really well placed after like 3 blistering tracks that were fast and heavy. And then you have like a little thing and then a clean intro to the next song, track 5. And I thought that was really well placed. That's some good song ordering in the first half of the album. I really appreciated that one. After that, I got to be like, up to track 8 was fine, and then after that, same as you, it's just absolutely just turned off. I feel like the vocal lessons that Rob has taken is a massive improvement on this album. I actually noticed right away the cleans sounded very in tune, and it didn't sound too edited, and it sounded like he was actually putting something in there. And I don't know, there's something different about his growling, his heavy guttural vocals on this as well. They sound like they're more full of hate and bile and fire and grit and stuff. I was like, wow, quite taken aback. It sounds like he's really got something, even if it's just a story, he's putting a lot of like emotion or something into it. It sounds that way. I don't know if he actually is, but that's how it came across to me. And I was like, cool, so Machine Head might be on the way back up. Nice. And then the last half the album came and I was like, well, maybe not. The drums, I just do want to mention.
Okay.
Because the writing and the playing of the drums is fantastic. Like, I really thought, like you said, that the guy was absolutely filling the role as perfectly as he could. He's not overplaying it. He's not underplaying it. It doesn't sound lazy. It sounds perfect for what it is. It's just a production I'm not a fan of. Sounds a bit plastic fantastic,
Yeah.
Bit too much. I think there's a blend of samples going on here, and I think they've gone too far in the direction of samples instead of raw drums. And it kept coming out to me when there was like snare fills and quick double kick drums and stuff. Especially on the one track, they've got like orchestral percussion, and you can definitely tell it's samples. And it's like, okay, I have a library that sounds more natural than that. You guys can do it. Come on. But I think it's a step up from the last few outputs. I completely agree. I think they've probably got a way to go to like really, really, really nail it. But this is a step in the right direction for me. Being a huge Machine Head fan in the past, I'm like quite happy that this has come out and shown like, you can still rock our fucking faces off. So yeah, man, not bad at all. The single still isn't great. Absolutely right. Just worst track on the album.
Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah. And what's weirder is that they did the single, like, they mixed it completely differently. Because they did it, like, in his basement on Twitch or something, and they just released that as a video. I'm like, that's not... Some weird decisions here, Rob. What you doing?
I think they did. They put it out on, like, Spotify and digital streaming as the normal album track.
Okay.
But the video they put out was this, kind of live...
It was just strange.
Yeah. Weird.
Oh, well.
Okay. Duncan, come on. We know you've listened to it.
Yeah, the sounds have passed through your earphones.
Tell us more.
Well, you're both wrong. You're both wrong for a start. The back half of this album is infinitely better than the first half of the album.
Oh, really?
No, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
From track 7, which is a filler track, Assimilate, through to track 13 is the Machine Head that I kind of want to listen to.
Oh.
The stuff that comes before is the Machine Head I couldn't give a fuck about, even like a tiny little fuck about. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know when Machine Head became I do actually know. I know exactly. The Blackening is when Machine Head became a band that I just couldn't get into. Long form Machine Head is not for me. I find it tedious.
Yeah.
To get through. I think songs that are 10 minutes long that have plenty of movements in them are worth listening to. Tracks that are essentially verse, chorus, an interlude, then verse, chorus, and then maybe another interlude, and then verse, chorus, like kind of repeatedly. That's why I really don't like Unhallowed as a song at all. And I think the verse plays about 5 times and there's about 6 choruses on it, and it's a 6.5 minute track, so I don't know what we're doing with that. I don't understand the need to constantly go back. If it's from a conceptual point of view to tell the story, you can write different movements and still use your lyrics. I find it kind of lazy writing, if I'm honest, and that is the most evident on the opening track, which is 5 minutes of whiny Rob Flynn to get to an interesting part of the song, which is another 5 minutes, and doesn't need to be at all. Choking Nassi's Your Hate is the token we're wanting to try and sound like what's selling right now, which is classic Machine Head, and they do okay at it. I don't like his vocals on it. Become the Firestorm is heavy. That's all I have to say about that. Overdose is a filler track, which I find the filler tracks in this completely needless when you have an hour-long album.
I agree with that.
My Hands Are Empty. It didn't really do anything for me either. Once again, it's kind of leaning into a formula that I think is not interesting. Machine Head. Unhallowed is fucking awful. It has maybe one of the worst riffs I've heard this year. Rob Flynn should be ashamed of that riff. And then Assimilate happens, and we get Assimilate's a little interlude, and I was like, all right, it'll be interesting to see where we go from this. And then Kill My Enemies kicked in, and I was like, well, here we go, right? We're stripping things back. It kind of has an older sound, a more ferocious approach. No Gods, No Masters kicks in. Once again, similar. It's heavy as fuck. I'm digging it. The melody on it's pretty cool. And then you get a 1-2 punch of Bloodshot and Rotten, which are arguably the best 2 songs on the album. They're the ones that feel most in keeping with traditional old school Machine Head. However, the ferocity you mentioned, Kyle, in the vocals is all over the place. I think there's 3 different vocals on that, so I don't know if Vogue lend his thing, or if Rob Flynn's doubling up with the bass player in the background. But by the time you're getting through, I think it's into Rotten, you get some proper black metal and death metal screams on that track, along with this really, really hard-hitting groove. that I was like, that. Just give me that. Like, it's almost blast beats on it. You know what I mean? It's just a ferocious track. And I'm kind of looking at it going, right, you have this in the chamber. You can clearly do this. Why am I sitting through a 10-minute song, which is whiny and croony? I don't understand it. Terminus is another fill-in track, which, I mean, is pointless. And the closing song is strong. So it's a confusing one for me. I think the thing that's more confusing is I knew it was coming, and I called it a Babe Ruth this weeks ago, is the mainstay internet's reaction to it, which is, this is the best Machine Head since the Blackening. And once again, the de facto approach is the Blackening is the best Machine Head album, when it's categorically not. Burn My Eyes is the best Machine Head album. It's not even close, it's the best Machine Head album. And that gives you my entry level. So if you are someone out there that's a huge Machine Head fan, loves the Blackening, who wonders why I don't like this album, my favourite album is the one that contains all the short songs and all the anger, which is the back half of this album, which contains all the short songs and all the fucking anger. So I'll link in with what you were saying. He hits a couple of notes on, I think it might be My Hands Are Empty, where his vocal range, he's hitting higher notes than I've heard him do before, and he nails them, like really, really, really nails them. And he steps out with the kind of classic Rob Flynn, this is the cadence of how I do melody. So he steps out of that. That was cool. Unhallowed has interesting backing vocals, but like I say, that riff is never going to win me over. Never in a million years. So yeah, I mean, it's not a good album. Is he down the road? It's not a bad album, but it's not a great album. I will never listen to this album again. I have like no inclination to listen to this album ever again, because, and it's getting so much press, and we're feeding into the press that it's getting by reviewing it. And that's the frustrating thing. There are a handful of bands out there that will fly. In fact, we're doing a recording tonight where at least 2 bands that we're going to be reviewing tonight will fly under the radar for most of the metal listening fandom out there, and they are infinitely better albums than this. Like on every level, like production, songwriting, execution, delivery, infinitely better than this. And this is where all the attention's going, and it's frustrating. Rob Flynn proved to me that Burn My Eyes is like a truly incredible album, and when you see it live, it's magical. Like, you see it in its entirety live, it's totally, it's almost to the point where you're like, this might be like pretty much a perfect album. There really isn't any filler on it. And at some point, I think it happens to all bands. All bands get long in the tooth and they start experimenting. Some of those experiments work and some of them don't. And all the money they made and all the accolades they got were off an experiment I didn't like, which is why they continually release albums that I don't really like. So, yeah. I'm sure if you're a mainstay Machine Head fan, you've been following the band, once again, want to stress, didn't listen to the previous album, maybe listen to the album before that, potentially.
Nah, give that one a miss too.
The Locust one was the last one I checked out, and I didn't like it.
That is better than all the ones that came before this.
Yeah. So if you're grading on a curve for me, Machine Head release a bland brand of metal that I'm just not interested in anymore. But had they given me the back half of this album as a full album, I would be immensely positive about it. But absolutely no way I'm going to suffer through 6 songs at almost 35 minutes in length to get to the songs that I actually enjoy. So, and you know me, I like listening to albums as a whole. I don't like skipping around. So, yeah, I'm the one that will attract all the hateful comments in the bottom here. And to be honest, I couldn't give a fuck.
Fair enough, thank you. Okay, so ratings for the new Machine Head album. I don't think this is a bad album at all. I think there's a lot of good moments on this album. My main issue was just the kind of fatigue of it. I just got kind of bored by kind of like track 9, track 10. I was a bit like, don't know if I can take much more, but I think that there is a lot of good tracks on this. I think the band sound really good. I like the production on it. I think Rob sounds improved, and when you compare this to the last album, it's night and day. Like, because the last album was shite. I'm going to go 3.5 on this one for me. Kyle?
I think I suffered from the fatigue too, because I can understand what Duncan's saying about the old school Machine Head coming through more on the back half of the album. I definitely get that, and I heard it myself, but I was just so tired from the first like fucking 45 minutes. I was like,
Yeah.
people need to start editing their goddamn albums down. I don't know. It's not a grand, amazing album like some bands we have seen this year, or things that Machine Head have put out before. So it's like, it's kind of middle of the road. So I think I'm going to come in 3.5 as well.
Okay. And Duncan?
2.5.
2.5. Okay.
It's a 5 out of 10 album. It's 2.5.
Okay. Machine Head of Kingdom and Crown, out August 26th on Roadrunner Records. I'll put some links below to the band. If there's any pre-orders and stuff, I'll stick them in there as well. Let us know what you think. Various opinions on this one. What do you think of the album? There's a bunch of singles out already. By the time this review drops, the album will be out pretty soon. So let us know what your thoughts are on the album. Stick some comments in below. That's the review. Thanks for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.